I want to tell you about a Tuesday. Not a famous Tuesday. Not one that made headlines. The kind of Tuesday that gets swallowed by the rest of the week and disappears by Friday. Cold. Gray. The kind of London morning where the sky looks like it couldn't be bothered deciding between rain and something worse. I was there because my sister had dragged me. That's the honest version. She'd been planning the trip for 8 months, had a notebook full of color-coded itineraries, had made me promise 3 separate times that I would not, her exact words, ruin this with your attitude. I promised. A minute, more or less. We were standing on the mall, maybe 40 meters from the main gates of Buckingham Palace, in a crowd thick enough that strangers' elbows became briefly familiar. Tourists with matching luggage tags from airports I'd never been to. A school group in yellow vests that moved like one organism. A man selling little flag pins who called everyone my friend, with a conviction I genuinely envied. My sister was taking photos. She does this thing where she takes 7 photos of the exact same thing, studies them, then takes 3 more. I'd stopped counting. I was cold, slightly hungry, and doing what I usually do in crowds, which is find something to stare at until the time passes. That's when I found him. He was standing at the far left of the 2 visible guards. Position. Still. The bearskin hat sat on his head like a building sits on its foundation. Not placed, just there as if it had always been and always would be. The red coat. The white belt crossing his chest like a line drawn by someone who didn't do anything halfway. The rifle at his side. I'd seen photos of these guys 100 times. Everyone has. They're on the mugs in the gift shops 3 streets over. They're on the magnets. They're the thing tourists come to provoke, to get close to take selfies beside while pulling faces. I know because 2 people in front of me were doing exactly that. A guy, late 20s, snapback cap, the energy of someone who has never once been told no by a universe that kept saying yes, was edging closer. His girlfriend was laughing and filming on a phone in a pale pink case. He was doing a slow creep toward the guardsman, inching, making his friend, standing further back, gesture frantically in a way that meant both go further, and I want no part of this. The guard did not move. Snapback got within a meter, made a face. His girlfriend's laughter went up an octave. He leaned slightly, putting his face near the guardsman's face, and said something. I didn't hear what. The guard's eyes did not move. Not a millimeter. Not a flicker. He was looking at a point in the middle distance that apparently had nothing to do with the person 6 inches from his peripheral vision, or the crowd, or the gray sky, or the whole grinding, loud, ordinary world arranged around him. Snapback retreated, laughing, arms out, as if he'd survived something. His girlfriend was already watching the video back. I kept watching the guard. Here's the thing nobody tells you about watching them for longer than 30 seconds. It starts to feel like something else, because at first you clock the stillness as performance. Discipline. A party trick with high stakes. But then you watch the chest. The barely there rise and fall. And you realize what you're actually watching is a person managing themselves. Actively. In real time. His eyes blinked. Of course they did. But slowly. With a quality I can only describe as deliberate. The way a person breathes through pain on purpose, so the pain doesn't win. My sister appeared at my shoulder. You're doing your staring thing, she said. Look at his chest, I said. She looked. Paused. What about it? He's counting, I said. He's definitely counting. She gave me the look she's been giving me since we were children, which means you're probably right, and I wish you weren't, and went back to her photos. I don't know when I became certain of it. Maybe it was the rhythm. There's a difference between someone who is simply still and someone who is managing their stillness the way a musician manages a long note. Actively, with intention, aware of exactly how much is left. His chest rose, held, fell, rose again. 1, 2, 3. Not anxious, not mechanical. There was something almost private about it, like watching someone pray. I felt faintly intrusive. I looked away for a moment, and then, because I am who I am, looked back. The crowd shifted around him like water around a post. A child pressed her face to the gate directly behind me, and her father scooped her up with the reflexive competence of a man who had done this specific rescue approximately 400 times. An older woman was reading something on her phone with the expression of someone receiving incrementally bad news. Pigeons did pigeon things on the pavement without apology. He breathed. 1, 2, 3. I was 11 years old the first time I understood that some feelings had no exit. My family had just moved. New city, new school, new version of me that I had not yet been issued instructions for. I used to lie in my new bedroom, which smelled of someone else's carpet cleaner, and count the wooden slats of the bunk bed above me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Back to 1. I didn't know what I was doing. I know now. I was giving my brain something manageable when everything else was a wall I couldn't see the top of. I'm not saying I had it like he has it. I'm not. But I know counting. I know what it's for. It was about 20 minutes in, I think, when the shift happened. Not dramatic. You could miss it entirely if you were on your phone or talking or doing anything other than the slightly obsessive surveillance I had accidentally committed to. A woman, maybe 60, gray coat, sensible shoes, the face of a person who had been through several things she didn't discuss, was standing close. Not tourist close, not snapback close. She was just near, and she had stopped pretending to look at the palace. She was looking at him, and then she did something I still think about. She didn't say anything, didn't wave, didn't take a photo. She just pressed her hand, briefly, flat against her own chest, over her own heart, like a salute that had nothing to do with rank. The guard's eyes didn't move. Of course they didn't. But his breath changed. One full beat. The rise came slower, held a half-second longer, like a held note at the end of a piece of music that means I heard you. I'm still here. Then back to the rhythm. 1, 2, 3. The woman walked away. I watched her go. She had the walk of someone who had seen something confirmed. My sister tugged my sleeve. We should go. The line for the tea place starts early, and I did not color-code a notebook for nothing. I let her pull me away. I looked back once. He was still there, still breathing, still counting the thing that kept the other thing, the bigger, quieter, heavier thing, from breaking the surface. I didn't know his name. I still don't. But I thought about him for the rest of the day. The way you think about a song you heard through a wall. You can't quite catch the words, but the melody stays in your chest, and you carry it home without meaning to. We came back the next morning. My sister's itinerary had us at St. James's Park for 8:30, then the Palace Gates for 9, then something involving a boat. But the tea place had been closed the night before. A handwritten sign in the window, no explanation, the way only London establishments can disappoint you with zero accountability. And she'd been recalibrating ever since. When I said I wanted to go back to the palace first, before the park, before the boat, before any of it, she looked at me over her oat milk and said, "You're going to stand there and stare at that guard again, aren't you?" I might. That's a yes. It was a yes. The morning crowd was thinner. Different texture than the afternoon tourists, more locals, or people who behaved like locals who walked with purpose and didn't pause to read every sign. A jogger cut through the edge of the plaza at a pace that suggested genuine cardio and not performance. 2 uniformed school children sat on a low wall, eating something wrapped in foil, while their teacher stood nearby, doing that particular teacher thing of being present and somewhere else simultaneously. The gates. The gravel, the long face of the palace like a sentence that never quite ends, and the guards. Different positions than yesterday. Different men, presumably. Same stillness. I found the one on the right. This one was younger looking, though it was hard to say by how much. These men all carry the same quality of age, which is no age, which is all ages. The bearskin adds 10 years. The stillness removes 20. He stood with his rifle and his coat, and the gray morning light on his face. I bought a coffee from cart nearby, stood close enough to the railing to watch without being the person who stands at a railing watching. I'm sure I failed at this. The thing about watching someone who can't react to you is that eventually you start reacting to them. It's a strange inversion. The crowd performs for him. The selfies, the faces, the encroachments, the little acts of bravado, and he refuses to be the audience. So the crowd, frustrated, performs harder, and still he doesn't watch. And eventually you realize the performance was never for him. It was for the other people in the crowd. Everyone doing their little dance to prove they exist, to prove they're fun, to prove they're not intimidated or impressed, to prove something. He doesn't need to prove anything. He just needs to breathe. I watched his chest. Same rhythm as yesterday, or what felt like the same rhythm. 1, 2, 3. The hold. The release. My coffee was too hot to drink. I held it anyway, palms warming on the paper cup, grateful for the sensation because the morning had teeth. A man sat down on the low wall about 6 feet to my left. Not a tourist, or not only a tourist. He had the look of someone who had chosen this spot deliberately, the way you choose a table at the back of a restaurant when you need to think. Late 40s. Dark coat with the collar turned up not against the cold, but against being seen. A slight forward lean that meant his brain was doing something his body was waiting for. He had a notebook open on his knee. Not writing, just open. His pen was in his hand, but horizontal, not tilted. He was looking at the guard the way I was looking at the guard, which is to say, not as a tourist. As something else. Recognition, maybe. He noticed me noticing him. We did the thing where you each look away first, and then back, and whoever looks back second gets to be the one who doesn't care. He looked back second. "You're watching him too," he said. Not a question. "Yeah," I said. "Third morning for me," he said. Like a confession. I didn't say anything to that. "I used to do selection," he said, and paused, and when I said nothing, he seemed to decide I didn't know what that meant, so he said military. "Long time ago." "Okay," I said. "We used to call it going into the box," he said. "When you've been somewhere long enough that your head starts doing it to you. The thoughts. You go into a box. Count something. Anything. Some men counted heartbeats. Some counted footsteps to the wall and back. Whatever fits in your hands." He was quiet for a moment. "He's counting breaths." "I thought that too," I said. He nodded, with the specific gravity of someone confirming a thing they already knew. "Smart. It's the best one. You can do it without anyone knowing. It doesn't have a number that runs out. Heartbeats, you get anxious about them, start listening too hard, and then you've made it worse." He clicked the pen open and closed once, a tight control motion. "Breaths just go." We both looked at the guard. "What's in the box?" I asked. "On the other side of the counting." He was quiet long enough that I thought he hadn't heard. For him, he tilted his head. Freedom, probably. The idea of it. What you'd do if the uniform came off. What the afternoon looks like when no one is watching you not react. He looked down at his notebook. "Same thing that's in everyone's box," he said. "The life that runs alongside this one." There was a moment, around 9:45, when the crowd briefly thinned. One of those pauses that happen in city mornings. The early surge done, the later surge not yet begun, a small gap where the plaza breathed out and took a moment before the next inhale. For pigeons occupied the space near the guard's left boot with the confidence of creatures that have never read a sign saying they shouldn't. And in that pause, I watched something happen that I've been trying to find the right word for since. His eyes moved. Not much. Not at all, really, by any official measure of what guards are allowed to do or not do. But they shifted, just barely, up and to the right where the sky over the palace roof had a clean strip of pale gold. Not quite sun, not quite not sun, and they held there for the space of 2 breaths. 3, then back to the middle distance. But those 2, 3 breaths, they were different. The rhythm changed. The hold at the top was longer. The chest rose with something that, if I'm being exactly honest, looked like want. Just for a second. Just for the 3 breaths it took to look at the sky and then not look at it anymore. The man on the wall had stopped pretending to write. "You saw that," I said. He said. He looked at the sky. He did. We were both quiet. Somewhere behind us, a bus announced itself with the particular aggression of a city vehicle that has places to be. The school children had finished their foil-wrapped breakfast and were now being organized into a crocodile line with varying degrees of success. "Does it help?" I asked. "The counting." He thought about this properly. "It helps you stay. It doesn't help you want to." He closed the notebook, tucked it into the inside pocket of his coat, stood up with the careful movement of someone whose knees had an opinion. "Same time tomorrow," I said. It came out as a joke. Mostly. He smiled. It was small, but it was real. "About a flight," he said. "But yeah, probably." He walked away in the direction of the park, collar still up, the pen still in his hand. My sister called at 10. Where was I? The boat waited. The itinerary was not a suggestion. I took one last look at the guard before I went. He was back in full stillness. Chest moving. 1, 2, 3. Eyes on middle distance. The pigeons had vacated. The crowd was building again. New faces, new cameras, new men in snapback caps who thought proximity to unmoved authority was some kind of game with points. He breathed. I thought about what the man on the wall had said. The life that runs alongside this one. I know something about that. The life in the box. The counting that holds it there. The 3 breaths where you look at something, sky, window, the particular quality of afternoon light through glass. And for a moment, the other life comes close enough to see. And then the breath finishes, and you look away, and you stay. You stay. I went to find my sister, why last morning in London, I went alone. My sister had an early flight. Different terminal, different time, the logistics of it meaning we'd said goodbye the night before over pasta and neither of us really tasted. She'd hugged me at the door of my hotel room and said, "You're going back to look at that guard one more time, aren't you?" And I said, "I'm going for a walk." And she said, "That's a yes." And I said, "Get some sleep." And she laughed and went down the corridor with her color-coded bag and her notebook that had gotten her through 8 months of planning and 2 countries in 6 days. I did not sleep. By 6:15, I was dressed. By 7, I was standing on the mall. It was different at that hour. Not closed, not empty. These streets never really empty. London is a city that treats sleep as a light suggestion, but reduced. The tourist crust not yet formed. Just the city underneath. The delivery vans, the joggers who were genuinely joggers and not joggers performing jogging. A woman walking a dog with the face of a creature who has outlived most of its illusions about mornings. The gates. The palace, gray and settled, occupying its ground with the patience of something that has been permanent so long it's forgotten there was ever any other arrangement. The guards. I want to tell you about this one carefully. The one on the left. He was taller than the others I'd watched. Or it seemed that way. The height could have been the early light, which has a way of extending things vertically. He stood with a precision that was slightly different from the others in a way I couldn't name immediately. Not more rigid, more present, as if he was using every inch of his stillness with conscious intent rather than trained reflex. His face was young, genuinely young, mid-20s at the most, maybe younger, a jaw that would have looked at home laughing over a table somewhere. Eyes that, when they blinked with a quality I recognized from people who have been awake too long. Not tired exactly, but aware of themselves being awake. His chest moved. 1, 2, 3. He was counting. I'm going to try to tell you what happened at 8:17 precisely. First, context. By 8 in the morning, a small, irregular crowd had formed. Not the mass that comes later, but enough. Maybe 15, 20 people. The kind of small crowd that's still self-conscious, still leaves gaps between strangers, still acknowledges that other people are also present. A man with a camera that cost more than my flight was positioned along the railing at a serious angle. 2 women, tourists, laughed at something on a shared phone. An older gentleman in an extraordinary hat stood with his hands behind his back and observed the palace with the expression of a museum curator who has concerns. The guard breathed. 1, 2, and then a child broke from the edge of the small crowd. 3 years old, maybe 4. The rubbery, unsteady run of a person whose legs are still in negotiations with gravity. Red coat, hood up, one mitten on, and one off, the way small children always have one mitten because the universe keeps the other as deposit against future chaos. She was running toward the guard. Not fast. She wasn't capable of fast exactly, but with the full throttle commitment of someone who has identified a destination and has not yet developed the social architecture that makes you think twice about running toward a tall man with a rifle. Her mother, 3 steps behind, the very specific face of a parent who has not yet decided if this is funny or a disaster, was doing the extended arm reach of someone who knows they're not quite close enough. The child ran. She ran directly into the guardsman's boot. Not hard. She didn't fall. She stopped because the boot stopped her, and she looked up at the height of him with the absolute unself-conscious awe of a person encountering for the first time the fact that some people are very large and very still, and the combination of these two things is interesting. She said something. I don't know what. Her voice was small and swallowed by the distance and the morning air. The guard did not move. Of course he didn't. She reached up. This is the part one have trouble describing, not because it was obscure, but because it was the opposite of obscure. She reached up with the unmittened hand and put two small fingers on the back of the guard's gloved hand. Just rested them there, the way a child touches something they want to understand by feeling. The mother arrived. Half apologized in a voice that meant I'm so sorry and please don't report us, and also she's 3. She scooped the child, who did not want to be scooped but accepted it with the long-suffering tolerance of the small and portable. The guard's hand. This is what I'm trying to tell you. His hand. The one where two small fingers had just rested, briefly, like birds landing on a windowsill. The fingers of his gloved hand moved. Not much. Not a flinch. Not a response. Nothing you could write a formal complaint about. Nothing a camera in the wrong position would catch. Just the faintest closing, the tiniest curl, the specific motion of a hand that is trying not to close around something that is already gone. One breath. The longest breath I watched him take across all 3 mornings. It crested and held, and held, and held. Then it fell. Then 2 more. 3. 4. Back to the count. I want you to understand what I think was in the box in that moment. Not abstraction. Not philosophy. Someone specific. A face. Maybe a little one. Maybe the particular weight of a small person who runs into your legs and doesn't have the social processing yet to understand you're not allowed to reach down and pick them up and say something into the hood of small red coat. That's what I think freedom looked like for the 4 seconds he held that breath. Not a field, not a crowd-free afternoon, not the simple absence of a uniform and the rifle and the eyes of strangers. Someone who touches your hand like it's interesting. Just that. There's a thing people say about discipline, that it's the absence of desire. That the trained person wants nothing, feels nothing, is sealed off from the ordinary pull of ordinary things. I don't believe that. I believe discipline is the presence of desire and the decision made anyway. Every morning, every breath, the desire is there. It goes nowhere. It's not extinguished. It doesn't diminish from distance or repetition. And every morning the decision is made anyway. Not because the desire doesn't matter, but because something else, the commitment, the code, the uniform, and what it means to the person inside it, matters in a different way. He is not empty. That's not what you're watching when you watch him. You're watching someone full to the edges of something, holding themselves at exactly the surface. 1, 2, 3. Not suppressed. Held. There's a difference. Suppressed things become other things. They go underground and come up sideways and poison the well. Held things stay true. Held things know what they are. He knows what he is, and he knows what he's holding. At 8:45, the changing of the guard detail began its approach from further down the road. I knew this because the cameraman with the serious equipment suddenly moved with the energy of a man vindicated by his early start. The crowd thickened at the edges, sensing ceremony. I stayed where I was. I watched the guard on the left until the ceremony required his attention, and for those last minutes before the ritual absorbed him, I watched his chest one more time. 1, 2, 3. Steady. Even. The rhythm of a person who has made an agreement with themselves about the shape of the day. In the cold morning air, his breath briefly showed, a small white plume at each exhale visible and then gone, visible and then gone, marking the count like punctuation. A sentence written in air. Gone before it could be read. I left before the ceremony finished. I don't know why. Partly because my flight was in 4 hours. Partly because whatever I'd come to see I'd already seen, and there's a thing about staying past that point. It starts to feel like you're taking something that wasn't offered. I walked back up the mall. The plain trees were bare, showing their skeletal architecture against the pale sky. A bus the color of possibility moved through the intersection ahead. Someone was selling roasted nuts at a cart, and the smell reached me like a small, warm hand. I thought about what the man on the wall had said. the life that runs alongside this one. I thought about the 4-second breath, the curling fingers, the white plume of air that appeared and disappeared and appeared and disappeared, marking the count, keeping the surface, holding the thing in the box away from the morning. I thought about the gray-coated woman who had pressed her hand to her own chest. I see you. I'm still here. I don't think these men want your pity. I don't think they want your understanding, particularly. They're not standing there to be understood. They're standing there because they agreed to stand there, and they're the kind of people who do what they agreed to do, even when the count gets hard, even when a small hand touches them and makes the box door rattle. But I think, and I say this carefully as someone who spent 3 mornings on a pavement in the cold doing something that probably looked eccentric, I think they want to be seen. Not photographed, not provoked, not used for a punchline in a video that gets 400 likes. Seen. The way the woman saw. The way the man on the wall saw. The way you can see someone when you stop performing and just look. The chest that rises. The breath that holds. The count that keeps everything in its right place when everything in its right place is the only thing standing between the surface and the thing below it. 1, 2, 3. My flight lifted out of London at 11:42. The city went small beneath me. The river, the parks, the thin lines of streets, all of it becoming pattern, and then abstraction, and then cloud. I sat back, closed my eyes, counted my breaths. 1, 2, 3. Not because I had to, because I finally understood why he did.